So, Northwest there pawb, croeso cynnes I gwaith di adeiladau gymuned. Good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to the Community Buildings Workshop. Could I just ask, I know a lot of us are used to Zoom now, but if you haven't muted your mic, please could you do so? You should be able to see a microphone button at the bottom of your screen, and if you just click mute, that will just make sure the quality of the call is as clear as possible for everyone. So I'm Melissa Townsend. I'm a County Development Officer for Powys, and will be supporting the workshop this evening along with a couple of my colleagues who will introduce themselves now as well.
Hi, good evening everyone. I'm Louise Hardwick. I'm also a County Development Officer, and my role is to support the community buildings and village halls through Powys.
Helo, noswaith Sioned Pritchard dwi, a dwi yma I hwyluso unrhyw gyfraniadau yn y Gymraeg heno. Bydd y gweithio'n cael ei gynnal drwy gyfrwng y Saesneg, ond os hoffech I gyfrannu'n Gymraeg, gwnewch hynny ar bob cyfri a mi allai I gyfieithu fel bod angen. Cyfrannwch ym mha bynnag iaith ydych chi'n teimlo fwyaf cyfforddus ynddi. The workshop tonight will be delivered in English. I'm Sioned and I'm here to help support any contributions in Welsh. If you'd like to contribute in Welsh, please do so. I'll be supporting the session and helping with translation.
Diolch, Sioned. We're delighted to have you all join us this evening. In terms of questions, please do use the chat pane, and then we'll be able to collate all of those questions afterwards. If you do want to voice your questions as well, you're more than welcome to. So during the workshop this evening, we're going to hear from Martin Turley, who's joining us from Mid and West Wales Fire Service to talk about fire safety measures. We also have Sue Lewis with us from Aberforth Village Hall, and she's going to be telling us about a very interesting project. I'm not going to steal your thunder there, Sue. Some fantastic things that Aberforth Village Hall have been doing, and she's coming to talk to us all about that and any questions that you have around the work they've been doing. Sue is happy to answer those. And then lastly, we'll be going through a booklet that we've created from the information that a lot of you have inputted into us, and it's for community buildings, from community buildings, and hopefully it will help then develop that discussion for future support needs. So hopefully a varied and diverse session for you all, and we hope that you'll find it useful and interesting. Please do, I've seen that Sydd has dropped a message into the chat, but please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat pane and say where you're from, just so people are aware of who's in the room. So without further ado, we'll get started, and I'll hand over to Louise just to introduce the first session.
Thank you, Melissa. Diolch. So please also feel free to use our hashtags. Melissa's going to pop these into the chat pane. So we've got English and Welsh hashtags, and promote our workshop and our AGM onto your social media accounts. So we're going to start without any more hesitation with our fire service talk from Martin Turley. So over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Louise, and good evening. And first of all, can you all give me some sort of expression that you can actually hear me? Just a bit of a brave thumbs up. Excellent, brilliant. So good start. So yeah, thank you very much for the invitation this evening to talk to you about fire safety and fire prevention with regards to community centres, village halls and like type premises. It's going to be very much a whistle-stop tour for the presentation this evening. Obviously, I think I've got a 10-15 minute slot to deliver to you this evening. I'm sure hopefully it will answer many of your questions that you may have, but undoubtedly if there are other questions they don't get covered this evening, then as we've already reiterated, put them in the chat box. So if we don't get a chance to answer them this evening, then they'll be forwarded on to me, and obviously we can cover them at a later date. So I'm going to share my screen with you now and go through a presentation. and hopefully it will cover some of the aspects that you fire safety in your respective premises. So I'll hopefully share my screen with you. Okay, without further ado then, business engagement, small and medium places of assembly, which hopefully I think covers the type of premises that you've currently got. So the aim of tonight then, to provide you guidance regarding the compliance that you will have to be in compliant with, which is covered under the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order. Bit of a mouthful, I note, so we shorten it to the FSO, the Fire Safety Order. So that's the regulations that you need to be compliant with. So what we're going to get out of this then, your legal requirement, how you're going to cover that, type of premises that the FSO covers, who's responsible for complying with it, who can conduct a fire risk assessment, that's probably what you're all wanting to hear a lot more about, what actually is the fire risk assessment, what's contained in it, what sort of things you need to cover, process of completing it, so how to go about it. So quite a lot to cover. As I said, we'll fly through the majority of it. So the legal requirement, obviously there is legalities. The old system, we used to deliver what we called a fire certificate on premises, which was very prescriptive. It told you exactly what you must do. And it was basically one type of premises, a village hall, one village hall had to do exactly the same as the village hall, you know, in the next village or the next town or whatever, irrespective of its size, its capacity or anything like that. So it was a one size fits all, but that was deemed not suitable. So what came in then was a new system, the FSO, the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order. And that's a risk-based approach. So basically you look at individual premises, your own respective village hall community centre, and you manage the risk with regards to fire that is pertinent to your particular premises. So you might come up with something, how you're going to deal with fire safety in your premises could be completely different to the village hall, let's say in the next village or the community centre next door. So basically what it covers is all workplaces and commercial premises, which you don't fall into that category, but all premises that the public have access to. So that's where you come in, pubs, village halls, churches, cinemas and theatres. So that's the area that you'd fall under the fire safety order under. We also look at the common areas of multi-occupied premises, residential buildings. So basically we look at anything other than single private dwellings. But obviously, you know, the likes of flats and places like that, we'll have to cover those as well. But it's only the common means of areas. So the stairwells up to and including the front door of those premises, obviously because that can be protecting the means of escape. Since the Grenfell, obviously now we're looking at actually the balconies and the external cladding, which actually wasn't covered by our legislation, but it soon will be as that's coming into force. So, and probably unsurprisingly enough, we cover guest houses and hotels and things, but on the end there, Airbnb. It also covers those. So if anybody's running Airbnb businesses as well, then obviously that comes under that FSO legislation. So responsible person, somebody at the end of the day is got to be responsible for taking all the actions and doing these assessments and coming up with how you're going to make your respective premises safe. So who is the responsible person? Okay, there's a number of ways of deciding who that is. If you're the employer, you would be the responsible person. You've got a duty of care to your employees and anybody else that's coming into that premises. That's not you guys. The owner of the building, potentially, if you own your own particular village hall or community centre, it could fall down to you. Could be the landlord. So if you're a tenant, it could be down to the landlord. Depending on what lease agreement you've got, it could be down to them. Usually, more often than not, it'll be the occupier in your particular cases. If you are the occupier of the community centre or village halls, then the responsibility will come down to you guys to make sure that required safety is in place. Because ultimately, you've probably got control over those premises. You take the bookings, you look after who comes into those premises. So it'll be down to you to make sure that they're suitable and safe for the use that you're putting them to. If there's more than one responsible person, then you're required to work together. Some places have got shared facilities. They might have shared escape routes, access facilities, shared alarm facilities. Some buildings are attached to the village school, and you might have the community centre or the village hall next door attached to it, but they may share parts of facilities. The alarm may be linked together. So with that purpose, then you must work together. And again, that's covered in our legislation, that if you've got shared facilities, you have to cooperate with each other. So what are the responsibilities, what you must do? First and foremost, you've got to have a fire risk assessment, and you've got to conduct that and review it regularly. You can't just do it once off and then put it on the shelf and forget about it. You've got to review it regularly. You've got to keep people that need to know what the risks are informed, and put in place and maintain appropriate fire safety measures. So following that risk assessment, you might come up with things that you have to either reduce the fire risk, and if they can't reduce it, measures you've got to put in place to make your property or your premises safe. Plan for an emergency. Yeah. So if something does go wrong, no matter how good your procedures are or your prevention measures, sometimes things inevitably could go wrong. So you have to plan for those inevitabilities. In multi-let premises, each tenant must have a fire risk assessment that covers their activity, and they've also got to adhere to the premises specific risk assessment. I think that's quite a pertinent point again for your types of premises, because you quite often let them out to other community users, different youth groups or whatever might want to use your facilities. So you've got to assess your particular community centre or village hall for its generic risks and put the preventative measures in place. But then whoever you're letting out your premises to have also got to know what they are, so they adhere to those. But importantly, you've got to know what they're going to be using your facilities for. And they should provide you with a risk assessment of what they're going to be using your facilities, what activities they're going to be carrying out. So you're happy and you know that they've put any preventative measures in place for what they're going to be doing. So they should be providing you with that information as well. And you should be providing them with the rules, as it were, the rules of engagement of the lease or the hire agreement that you've got, so they comply with your fire risk assessment as well. So who can conduct that fire risk assessment? Any competent person. Pretty of a broad statement there. But a competent person is someone with enough training and experience or knowledge to conduct that task. This could, in fact, be you or one of your committee members, okay, that as soon as we put on the terminology risk assessment, a lot of people shy away from it because we've labelled it a risk assessment. It's not a complicated process, and a little bit further on the presentation, I'll be going through that with you as well. We do risk assessments all the time, pretty much every day of our normal daily life. We're conducting risk assessments, but not in the form of recording them. You know, if you get across the road, hopefully everybody will do a risk assessment before they cross that road. They're looking at what the hazards are, the moving traffic, who's going to get hurt, me crossing that road. How can I reduce or prevent that risk? I could go to a level, a proper pedestrian crossing, stop, look, listen, the green cross code. You're doing a risk assessment. It's no different with a fire risk assessment. But you can do the fire risk assessment yourself with the help of standard fire safety risk assessment guides. And again, a bit later on, I'll show you one of these guides. So there's plenty of advice and help out there specific to your types of premises. You've got the knowledge of those premises and how it's going to be used and the people at risk. So you are probably best placed to do those risk assessments. You can seek advice from the fire service. That's what you're doing here this evening, hopefully. But we can't do your risk assessment for you. Because we are the enforcement agency, as it were, looking after fire safety, we can't do the risk assessment and then come and review our own work. Okay, we can give you assistance and help, and then we look at your risk assessment and we'll deem whether it's suitable and sufficient and whether you've covered all bases. Or ultimately, you can appoint a competent person to help. For example, a professional fire risk assessor. Okay, there's plenty of them out there, but but obviously there will be potentially some financial costs for them to produce that or produce the risk assessment for you. And if you are employing a fire risk assessor, then make sure that they are competent and they've got some sort of certification and liability against obviously what they're going to be providing you with. You want to value for money, and also you want what they're doing to be correct. So guidance, as I said, there's guidance documents out there to help you. They're produced by the Secretary of State or the Department of Local Government have produced these, and there's a suite of these guides, and they're there to assist the responsible person in the discharge of their duties, to be able to go about and make their premises safe, basically. And they cover all the articles of enforcement, 8 to 22 in there, to make sure that you are complying with everything that you need to do. And I've highlighted Article 9, the risk assessment there. That is the basics. That's the grounding of where you need to start with looking at your fire safety within your particular premises. Basically, these guides are allowed to be revised, and they are in the process at the moment of being revised, and they're being trimmed down quite a bit and making them even simpler to read. They are quite an easy to read. In fact, they are a very easy to read and simple document to read. They're not full of technical or too much technical jargon or terms that you won't understand. They are written very, very well. And hopefully the new ones that are being revised will be even better. Basically, Article 50 means basically that they can revise and change any of those documents as and when they deem necessary, which is what they're currently doing at the moment. Okay, so these guides cover pretty much all the types of premises that we would be going out and auditing, inspecting. And halfway down the list there, you've got that one, small and medium places of assembly holding 300 people or less. So I should imagine that would be the guide that you guys should get your hands on as and when possible, if you haven't already got it, to assist you with, first and foremost, doing a fire risk assessment if you want to do that yourself, or basically you'll be using it as a cross-reference of any fire risk assessment that you receive from anybody that you would employ to carry that out for you. So I say they're a nice document. There's lots of pictures and some examples and things in them. So you should be able to recognize your particular premises within there and see, the sort of situations that you'll need to deal with. There is supplementary guides available there as well, means of escape for disabled people. So that's something as well that you possibly would have to take into consideration as well if your facilities have access for people with disabilities, be it for wheelchairs or mobility or other abilities, sight impaired, hearing impaired and stuff like that would also be covered in that document. So split into two parts, these guides. The first part is about the fire risk assessment, how to go about it and conduct a fire risk assessment, which we'll cover in a wee while. And then what sort of measures you could potentially put in place. It won't give you all the answers, because if you remember right at the start, you can come up with different answers to deal with the issues or situations that you may come across in your particular premises. And there's the nice word there, they are free to download, okay? Because they're a government guidance document, they're there to assist and help you. They are free to download. And there's a link there, which we can forward on to you if you don't write it down quick enough as the presentation now goes on, but we can certainly get you that information. Or you can just put in Google risk assessment guides and they'll come up, and you choose that small and medium places of assembly. And that's the one that will come up for you. And I say they're very, very useful. I recommend, if you haven't got one, that you go and have a look at those. They're useful for all employers, managers, occupiers and owners. So again, they cover every eventuality of who that responsible person may be. They tell you how you might comply with fire safety law. It gives you advice on how to avoid fires and how to ensure people's safety in a fire if it does start. Okay. And of course, they apply to England and Wales only. The other parts of the UK have got their own guidance documents, but those ones will cover England and Wales. So they help you carry out that risk assessment, identify general fire precautions you have in place in less complicated premises, which is hopefully what you guys are looking after and managing. And they're not prescriptive. They don't set the standards, but provide you with recommendations and guidance for you to use when assessing the adequacy of your precautions. Okay, so I said they're not prescriptive, and that's what we've gone away from. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You could come up with, within your risk assessment, how you are going to deal with a particular situation, what precautions, what measures you may need, and they could be completely different to your neighbours, what they come up with. They also come up with how you can manage your businesses. So it's not just the physical precautions in there, but also how you can manage that premises now. And that's where a lot of things can fall down. You can have all the best singing and dancing, fire prevention, fire precautions measures in there, fire suppression systems, automatic detection systems, fire alarms, whatever you put in place. But if you don't look after them and don't manage them, then that's where things can fall down as well. And we'll cover that in a little while. But your responsibilities of maintaining whatever facilities you've put into your premises. There's no obligation to adopt any particular solution. As I've said, they're only a guide. And if you come up with a different way of doing it, then that's fine. We would come along and have a look to see what you've put in place and think, oh yeah, I've never seen it done like that before, but that's good. We like that. That's yep. You can carry on with whatever it is that you've put in place. So what is the risk assessment? Yeah, organised, methodical look at the premises. So going around it with an organised method. What activities you're carrying out there. So it's not just the structure of the building, it's what you're going to be using it for. Remember when I said about considering whoever else you let those premises out to, what they're going to be doing in there. What's the likelihood or the chances of something happening or the fire happening and could start? Who's it going to hurt? And it doesn't just include those people inside the building. You've got a responsibility for anybody around and about the building as well. So anything that causes harm to anybody, if you've got a public footpath or the pavement is quite close, you've got a responsibility to look after the people that could be around your building as well, not just those inside it. Okay, so what's the assessment do? First of all, you've got to identify the hazard. The main hazard we're talking about tonight is obviously fire. If you identify that your building could catch fire or there's certain things in that building that may start a fire, how can you reduce that likelihood of those fires from starting? And who's going to be at harm? So remember I said you've got to identify the different people that were in your property. And then what you're going to put in place to prevent those fires from happening, and should they happen, how you're going to make people safe so they can escape. So got to take account of the whole premises, including outdoor locations. Remember what I said, it's got to include people that could be near or to your premises, and especially rooms that are rarely used. Yeah, that storeroom or that boiler room that's tucked away around the corner, you've got to include it as part of your fire risk assessment. Large complex premises, what we recommend is you split them down into areas and you risk assess each individual area as to what the hazards and the risk and what control measures you may put in place for those particular areas. Okay, you can split it down into bite-sized chunks if you find that easier to do. Okay, and you can't just do it as a tabletop exercise. Okay, yeah, I remember, this is what it looked like. You probably go in your properties frequently, but it can't be a desktop exercise. You must do a physical inspection and see what actually is in there. And it does throw up some things that you may not have considered before, and you find things that you may have forgotten or missed if you should do it as a desktop. So it's got to be a physical inspection. Walk around the building and have a look. And remember, walk around outside as well. So it's a 5-step approach that we use. Okay. Basically, step 1 is identifying the fire hazards. What's going to cause a fire? Okay. What could burn. Inevitably, pretty much anything and everything could burn given the opportunity, and your oxygen supplies that are in that building. There's plenty of it around us, but some facilities may have stored oxygen facilities depending on who's using their premises. Identify who's at risk. That's important. You've got to make sure that you cover every eventuality, who's going to be in your building. Once you've done that, then how can we reduce those issues? Can we remove the hazard completely? Can we substitute it with a different process? Or if we can't, we've got to put protective measures in place, firefighting equipment, lighting, detection, whatever you need to put in. Once you've done that, you've got to record it and plan it, and make sure that you just don't keep that information to yourself, that you make sure who needs to know gets to know about it. And as I said, review it. We say review regularly. Regularly, we would expect to be at least every 12 months, you should review your fire risk assessment, unless there's some significant changes, i.e. you alter the building, you change its layout, you put an extension on, or you change some of the internal layout, or if you change what you're going to be using it for, some different activities come along, then you should review your risk assessment there. Or if your type of people or your clientele changes, you've got a different user group coming in, then make sure you review your risk assessment accordingly, because you might not have identified those persons on your initial risk assessment. So identifying hazards. Fire usually starts when heat comes into contact with anything, and anything pretty much will burn. 3 things you look out for then when identifying fire hazards. Source of ignition. Yeah. Smoking, that's not so much of an issue now, thankfully, because it all has to be done outside. But remember what I said, your risk assessment includes the outside areas as well. So if you've got designated smoking areas, I suggest you don't put them on next to the fire exit or where you store the rubbish and the bins and things. Where your smoking area is located, risk assess that that is a suitable and sufficient place to have your designated smoking area. Work processes, yeah, cooking, if you've got kitchen areas, what sort of cooking facilities you've got in there. Have you gone away from open gas hobs now to electric rings or whatever you've got? So identify what you've got. Supply of fuel, yeah, as I said, anything will pretty much burn. Don't just think of the obvious of, oh yeah, we've got gas in our property. When it catches fire, think of the furniture, the curtains, the soft furnishings, whatever you've got in your building, identify them that they could burn. Oxygen, yeah, don't try and make sure that your building is airtight. It won't do your occupants much good if they're all in there and they'll need their oxygen supply as much as the fire does. Okay. So once you identified that a fire could start, whatever, but if a fire starts, who's it going to hurt? Who's at risk? Employees. Okay, so that's potentially could be your committee members first and foremost, and anybody that's looking after your premises for you. Visitors, that's primarily who you're going to be trying to keep safe, as anybody that's coming into your community centres or village halls. You've got to look after them. But also contractors, yeah, you've got a responsibility. If anybody's coming into your premises to mend the cooker or to service the lights or do whatever, you've got to make sure that they know when they come onto your premises what to do should a situation happen or a fire starts. They know what to do as well. So you've got a responsibility to look after them. Deliveries, inspectors, yeah, I've put that on there. So when I come around and look at your community centre or your village hall, I want to make sure that you're going to keep me safe while I'm in there as well, and I'm going to be able to get out if I need to, or you can warn me that there's a fire starting and give me the necessary time to escape. Residents, not quite so prevalent to you, unless you've got attached, some of your properties might have a caretaker's facility attached to them or whatever. So again, take that into consideration. And remember to consider special requirements for identified vulnerable persons. Yeah, so we've talked about that. Could be young persons, you may be running play groups there. Older members of our communities, and especially those with disabilities. Make sure that if you've got them coming into your facilities, that they've been identified and the particular measures that you need to keep them safe are made available for them. Okay, so evaluating the people on the premises that smoke could be, so you might have to do something about that. if you've got a number of electrical appliances, that's quite an interesting one. Make sure that they're regularly tested. When we moved over from fire certification, part of a fire certification that we used to issue, we had to see that you'd got a 5-yearly fire installation certificate. That never migrated across with the fire safety order, but we still recommend that. We can't enforce that you do that 5-year inspection of your hard wiring within the premises, but we will recommend it. And if it's deemed that we see that your premises isn't standard to that, then we'll come across using Article 8, which is your general fire precautions. We could actually, if need be, we could enforce things under general fire precautions to say that you're not doing that. But there isn't anything specific in legislation that says you've got to do your fire electrical standards. Pat testing, yeah, hopefully all your portable appliances get that done. But when that gets done, don't forget the stuff that's stored away in the cupboards that doesn't come out very often. Your Christmas lights and things like that, it's quite prevalent. They'll be coming out soon. But when you do your pat testing, if it's in the middle of summer in June or July time, then don't forget to bring equipment out to be pat tested that you only use, once or twice a year. So don't forget those bits and pieces. Hot works, yeah. If you've got any plumbing and things going on, you say the contractor's coming in, make sure that they've done that as well. So how do we do that? Yeah, reduce. Smoking is only permitted outside now, so we can reduce that. Pat testing, we've covered that. And hot works qualified. Make sure whoever's coming in to work on your property and your premises, they know what they're doing, and also the precautions are put in place to allow them to do what they're going to do. Yeah, rubbish and refuse, make sure that they're suitable containers and they're stored again in a suitable location where they're not potentially going to get somebody could set fire to them easily, arson attack or what have you. Protecting people from risk, yeah, identify the people, we've covered that, and reduce the risk. Fire detection and warning have you got that in place? Suitable and sufficient means of escape. So if they do warn them, is there enough gaps in the walls, i.e. doors, that people can get through with the numbers that are sufficient for your particular premises? Lighting is made available to escape. Again, a lot of our community centres and village halls are nicely tucked away in our rural communities where street lighting isn't as prevalent as it used to be, if you've got any at all. So we've got to provide lighting that is suitable and sufficient for your people to escape and to walk away from your building safely. Signs and notices, yep, indicating, especially if it's a complex layout, as to which way they can go, and if you've got alternatives, which way they can go as well. Appropriate firefighting equipment. If you risk assess that you need firefighting equipment in your premises, then it's got to be suitable and sufficient for the risks that you've identified, the right types of extinguishers and the right amount and number of them. Maintenance, I've mentioned that. Whatever you've got and put in place, you need to look after it. Fire detection and warning, yeah. Is there a need for a fire alarm? Quite often, it's depending on what your it will be dependent on your premises, whether you need to go all singing and dancing automatic fire detection, or could a shout of fire be heard throughout the premises? Is that suitable and sufficient? If the people are alert and awake within your premises and it's small and a fire is going to be easily spotted and detected, then a simple shout of fire could be suitable and sufficient. If that's recorded in your risk assessment and we come out and have a look and say a shout of fire is what we're going to do to raise the alarm, we would have a look. We'd ask you to go and stand in the furthest part of the building and I'd shout fire, or I'd get you to shout fire. And if I can hear you, then potentially it could be. But if there's 3 or 4 doors in between us and you shouting fire and we can't hear you, then you might have to look at another method. It's not always usual that you have to install a fire alarm system. As I say, it's whatever you deem necessary for your particular identified premises. Other means than just shouting, yeah, you could install whistles, horns, or rotary bells on the wall, whatever. But whatever you decide is suitable and sufficient, that's what we'd come and assess against. But if you've got sleeping accommodation, then you will require automatic fire detection system in there. But I don't think that will probably be prevalent in your situation. Or suitable and sufficient means of escape. You've got to, as I said, you've got to have enough holes in the wall for people to get out of. Okay, So is there enough numbers of exits and escape routes for people to have? Depending on the size of the building and your capacities of the building will determine how many doors you need for enough people to get out. Okay. A single exit in some situations can be suitable and sufficient, but that would be limited down to 60 people only in that particular premises. The direction that the doors open as well. Ideally, your escape doors should open in the direction of your means of escape. Okay. But if they don't, and if it's not feasible and not possible, then it can restrict the numbers that you're allowed. Suitable width. Yeah, remember, if you've got disabled persons coming in there that are possibly using wheelchairs, then again, they've got to be suitable and sufficient for them to fit their wheelchairs through. And consider then steps, ramps, and such like as well. Got to keep them, no matter if you've got them in place, you've got to maintain them. As I said, keep them clear at all times and available at all times. They've got to be easily openable. Okay, we don't like doors or emergency doors and fire exits. We won't accept them if they've got to be use a key to open them. If they're going to use a key to open them because you've got them for security reasons, then they must be unlocked. Part of your management regime, they've got to be unlocked at all times the building is occupied, and remain and not be able to be locked whilst people are in there and get inadvertently locked. So single action is what we prefer. Either push bars or even just like Yale type locks. If it's a thumb turn, then that's just a single action, but we don't want to have to go hunting around trying to find keys to open up doors to let people out in the event of an emergency. Stairs, if you've got multi-level properties, then the stairs should be suitable and sufficient for people to escape. And again, if you've got stairs and you've got the facilities to take people upstairs, albeit in a lift, but we don't use lifts in the event of a fire, okay, you've got to have facilities to allow to get those people down from upstairs. And again, identify this in your risk assessment. Lifts should not be used as part of your escape unless they are a designated, specified firefighting lift. Emergency lighting, yeah, okay, I said we've got to have that. It's to allow your escape routes to be used and be able to see them at any moment in time. The emergency lighting should come on or be a provision for emergency lighting should your normal lighting circuit fail. And that's what the purpose of it is for. So if your normal lighting fails for whatever reason, be it a power cut, regardless of whether it's a fire, but be it a power cut, you've still got to be able to get people out of your property safely. Okay, provide this along your escape routes, allow safe movement out. Also, it's got to identify if you've got fire alarm call points or equipment en route. The emergency lighting should be suitable and sufficient for people to be able to see those. So they're plunged into darkness because there's a fire. Well, they want to raise the alarm. They've got to know where if you've got call points or that rotary gong, where they are, that the emergency lighting should be suitable and sufficient for them to be able to find those. There may be certain tasks that need to be done as well. So again, this is to other premises. If you've got gas shut-off valves or processes that need to be stopped before people leave the building to make the building even safer, then the lighting has got to show you where like your emergency stop buttons are or shut-off valves and things are as well. But again, if you've got sleeping risks, then they will all require emergency lighting. Or if you're using your buildings in the hours of darkness, which invariably we will be this time of year now, you've got to provide some sort of emergency lighting facilities for them because we can say that there won't be the borrowed lighting potentially from street lamp lights outside. Signs and notices, yeah, you've got to have suitable and sufficient ones. Fire action note plans so people know what to do. So if the fire alarm goes off, there's a notice that is on the wall by their exit points or the call points to tell them what they should do in the event of a fire. Indicate where their escape routes are, so directional arrows. They can't be text only anymore. They can't just have words on them. They've got to be pictorial as well. Door opening mechanisms, they've got to be easy to be able to see. So if it's a thumb turn, there's usually an arrow to tell you which way to turn it. Or if it's a push bar, then we've all seen them say just push bar to open the door. Fire doors, label those up so people know which are fire doors. So they know they've got to keep them shut, whether they've got to be kept shut or even locked shut, depending on what the risk is. Firefighting equipment, signs to tell people where that is, but also what type of equipment it is and what they can use that equipment on if you deem that you want to have some in your premises. Safety of shut-off valves, where's the gas valve, where's the electric isolation, if you want those to be readily available to be isolated. And any other emergency equipment that you might have, your evac chairs on the top of the stairs for people that can't get down the stairs on their own unassisted. So you need to have indication as to where that sort of equipment is located as well. A lot of people say, well, I don't want all these stickers and these around the premises. They can look unsightly, but there are some quite nice ones out, but they are very, very important. Firefighting equipment, yeah, okay. So if you deem that you want to have and need to have firefighting equipment in your premises, then you need to identify what type of fires, whether they're electrical fires, carbonaceous fires, fat fires in your kitchen. Identify what your hazards and risks are and have the suitable fire extinguisher required to deal with that particular aspect. Okay, so what's going to be covered? Number of floors, how many floors you need to cover. You can't just have extinguishers on the ground floor if you've got risks upstairs. You need to have extinguishers upstairs if you deem that necessary in your risk assessment. What's the type of fire potentially could be, so you've got the right extinguisher for it. And fire blankets, yeah, whether that's just one for putting out the fire or whether you need ones for putting out, should individual or person's clothing catch fire as well, you might deem you need a larger size for that. Maintenance, yeah, whatever you provide, you've got to look after it. It's got to be regularly tested and regularly looked after. Your fire alarm detection system, if you've got one installed with sounders, alarms, even just your detectors upon the ceiling, okay, a fully installed system should be inspected every 6 months by a competent person. So that's an alarm engineer if you've got that type of equipment in there. Escape routes, make sure that they're kept clear and viable at all times, not blocked. If somebody hasn't parked the car against the fire escape door outside in the car park, you've got that kept clear. Signage, are they still where they should be? Have they fallen off the wall? Can you still read them? Is the information that's on them still true and correct? Fire doors, if you've got fire doors installed in your premises, make sure that they're still doing what they should do. Do they close properly into their frames completely? Do they shut tight against the door stops? They're not, they've got excessive gaps around them or anything like that. Emergency lighting, if you've got standard emergency lighting fitted in there, again, that should be a 12-month certification on your emergency lighting systems by a competent person. Portable firefighting equipment, if you've got extinguishers, again, they should be inspected and tested by a competent person every 12 months. Okay. Fixed installations, yeah, if you've got sprinklers, they need to be inspected and tested as well. Electrical equipment, we've talked about that, past testing, and the mains fuse board and all the hard wiring through the premises as well. Get those checked out. Services, gas, anything like that you've got in there, oil, boilers, such like, check those out. Okay, we recommend having a logbook to make all those checks in, because in between all those competent checks, there's a list of checks that you should be doing yourselves in the interim to maintain as well that you're looking at, and that'll all be included in that logbook. Okay, probably a little bit more prudent if you're employing people, but I would say again with this, your committee members, if you've got specific roles and responsibilities, then again make sure that everybody knows what they should be doing. With your risk assessment, if you employ 5 or more people, or if you've got licensed premises, then you have to actually have a written record of your fire risk assessment, predominantly the significant findings. So what you found to be the hazards, who you found to be at harm, and how you're going to deal with it should be recorded down. I would recommend that everybody records their fire risk assessment just to make sure that you've done it and a thorough job and you've covered all bases. It's all well and good having it, stored in your head, or whoever's done the last one, well, that's my risk assessment, and not passing that on to whoever might take up that role and responsibility in the future. So I would recommend you all make a written, recorded fire risk assessment. Yeah, license active, yeah, if you sell alcohol on the premises, or supply it, refreshments or whatever like that, you'd have to have a recorded risk assessment anyway. Alterations notice, that particular building, if something's got something in place that it has to have, and if they decide they want to remove that for whatever reason, they can't do that without telling us first. Prepare for an emergency plan. So roles and responsibilities. Yeah. So if something goes wrong, who's going to go and check out? So you're in the community centre, your village hall, and the alarm goes off. Having specific roles and responsibilities. Who's going to investigate why is the alarm gone off? Okay. Dial 999. Instigate or lead the evacuation. So you might have wardens to lead people out. Check certain areas where there may be vulnerable people. A roll call at the assembly point. So I identify where your assembly point is, usually probably in the car park or the big tree in the corner of the field, wherever you want it to be. But that should be part of your emergency action plan, is to people know where it is. When the emergency services turn up, have somebody there to meet and greet them so they know what they're dealing with. Provision and guests for visitors. When people coming in, that you tell them beforehand what they should know before they come onto your premises and how to deal with the situation. So you've probably seen those on the centres, and make sure that information is relevant and pertinent. Okay, where the assembly point is, and how to call the fire service or whichever emergency services you need. Instruct and train. Yeah, practice your emergency procedures. So whatever you think is necessary, you need to try out to see whether your plan actually works. So if you've got roles and responsibilities, then actually have a practice, have a drill to see if it happens. Practice evacuation. Okay, can you get the people out? And when I say practice evacuation, human nature is that we all want to go out of the building the same way that we came in. What I suggest is, if you've got more than one way out, mix it up a little bit. Take out your main entrance door, say, well, that's where the fire is, we can't go that way, and see if people can find their other ways out. So they know they can follow the signs, or if they know there's other routes within the premises. Train identified staff. So if you've got specific roles, make sure that they know what they're doing. And if you are supplying fighting equipment, i.e. extinguishers, then if you're providing them and expecting people to use them, then there's a responsibility for you to know, for them to know how to use them. Okay, so you can't just put them there and provide them and expect your committee members or whoever's going to use them. You should be offering them some sort of training and advice on how to actually use that equipment. Induction, yeah. So if you've got a new youth group or new people coming in to use your facilities, give them an induction. Let them run through your fire risk assessment, your procedures with them, so they know what they should be doing when they're there. Yeah, instruction given to visitors and contractors. If you've got people coming in, you're not expecting the fire alarm to go off. You're not expecting to do a drill. Okay, let them know that. So should they hear it, it's for real, and what they should do in that event. And I said, review it. Make sure that your risk assessment is up to date. Keep on top of it. If something changes, then review it on that. Annually, as I said, every 12 months, unless it's, if it's not valid, something has changed, then you need to change it. Significant changes, something in the building has changed. You've changed the layout. You're doing something different in there now, then review your risk assessment. Extensions, yeah, inevitably that would have to become part of your new risk assessment because the building has changed. And yeah, if nothing has changed, then just state that you have reviewed it, sign and date it. That review was done, no significant changes, and sign and date who's done that. And your risk assessment could stay the same for a number of years if you're doing the same activities and the building is exactly as it was. So as I said, it's a real whistle-top tour. I could talk all night. I'm not going to, because you've got lots of other business to get through. So this presentation has been recorded. I have sent the information on to Melissa and Louise as well. So anything else that you want to know, then yeah, get in touch with us via Melissa and Louise. And that's pretty much me for this evening.
Thank you so much, Martin. I'm sure you'll all agree that was absolutely amazing. So full of lots of really useful information. We've got a few questions that we've got in the chat pane. What we're going to do is we're going to move on to Sue at the moment, and we will answer those questions. If Martin has to leave, we will get those questions answered and back to all of you anyway, so please don't panic and think we're ignoring you. So thank you ever so much, Martin.
No problem, thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to Sue. Sue is from Aberforth, and I will let her do the talking. Thank you, Sue.
Okay, thank you, Louise, and thank you, Martin. That was really interesting. I was busy scribbling some notes down, and I'll be taking that back to my fellow trustees. So yes, good evening, everyone. My name's Sue Lewis. I'm a trustee at Aberforth Village Hall. Aberforth is on the west coast of Ceredigion. It's quite a large village by Ceredigion standards. It's about 1,500 people. Our village hall was built in 1935. It was a steel structure, and for some reason the asbestos cladding was used all over it. So I'm sure Martin would have a fit if he came and saw it. And for the last 40 years, we've been trying and failing to get a new hall, really since the lottery first started. So 2 years ago, I was taken on as a project officer to really try and get things focused. Aberforth has got a lot going for it. The village hall was bequeathed lands, including the 2 village car parks. So you can imagine with tourists, especially the last few summers we've had, we've got a really good income stream, which comes in as well as the room hire. So everything seemed to be there, but we just couldn't get success with funding bids. So I had a look at it and created the Heart of the Community project, which was really looking more, not so much at the building, but what was going on inside it. And so we created this Heart of the Community project, which is basically all about creating a warm and welcoming community hub. We're planning to be open longer, open from first thing in the morning right through to the evening, free Wi-Fi, and having projects such as a community fridge, a luncheon club, all sort of really community focused. So we put the bid together. We managed to secure 450,000 from the lottery, the Community Lotteries Fund, a further 250,000 from the Welsh Government's Community Facilities Programme. We got 25 grand from Ceredigion County Council. It's a small authority, so that's as much as we can expect. 4,000 from our local community council, and ourselves, we're putting in a whopping 150k. I told you those car parks were useful, and they've managed to sort of balloon our savings pot. It's still not enough. The whole project is 1.1 million. And we will be filling in the gap. We're taking out a loan, again, using the lovely car parks, with the WCVA for a further 150k. So the project is now underway. The hall, the asbestos and steel structured hall, is now a hole in the ground. And we have moved our community activities. We have a second community building, which used to be a youth club. It was built in '96 with sports lot money. It's basically a sports hall and a room. But we got funding from Cynnal Cardi, which is a Ceredigion Council run funding stream, and it's with European money. And that funded a community fridge and, most importantly, a community fridge coordinator. So that is up and running now and really successful. Tesco, Aldi, Co-op are giving us their surplus food. And it's not a food bank, it's all about stopping food waste. So there is an element of the Heart of the Community project, which is all about eco-awareness, the environment, etc. I also got funding from Keep Wells Tidy for a community garden, which is right outside the community fridge. And that's a fantastic project. You get about 8 grand's worth of equipment, including a greenhouse, shed, tools, loads of seeds, loads of plants. So that's up and running. And we also work with the Just Good Things Foundation, who provided us with computers. There's a laptop plus 3 tablets. We now run a regular Digi Club, which is all about enabling people to become digitally confident and literate. So we have a weekly club. We've got 6 regular users who fair to say are more senior, but one lady who's in her 90s. And we've got one of our volunteers is a retired IT teacher, and she's running the club. So that's really fantastic as well. And we're hoping to build on that because we have Wi-Fi. It's going to be, it's free Wi-Fi and people can log on to it. So already our Heart of the Community project is beginning to function. The tenders for the new hall are just about to go out. I can't tell you what a nightmare it's been having to do this in COVID and with Brexit and with the Suez Canal and with spiralling building costs. It was one sort of double whammy after another. We're fairly certain that our 1.1 million project is not going to be enough. So I will be looking around for other funding pots, but until the builders come back to us and are appointed, we've tried to sort of scale the design back. We had a lovely glazed entrance, so we're possibly using that as phasing that and having that as a second phase. So to date, everything seems to be going to. We've pulled the money down from the Welsh Government. The lottery have been really flexible, and we're looking at pulling that money down next year. Obviously, getting the money is, well, it's not easy, but it's fairly straightforward. Delivering the project is where the hard work comes in. The whole project, putting it together from scratch, has taken 2 years. Thankfully, we did the public consultation literally the summer before lockdown. We got all the results. We spent the summer asking people about, what they wanted, how they envisaged it, etc. That was quite an intense. I think we had about 500 replies by the time we counted them all up. And we actually did a presentation on the findings, which basically shaped the Heart of the Community project. We did a presentation March 2020. So I think it was the last ever event in the hall before everything went, closed down. So we had all that in place. That was really important, the community consultation. In fact, the lottery fed back to us that they were really impressed with that. So if anyone is thinking of doing a similar project, I'd really recommend that you get your community consultation in. So today, as I say, everything is going well. Weirdly, success seems to attract other funding. And we are working with our local authority, Ceredigion. The new hall is actually going to have disabled accessible toilets. I mean, I'm sure you're all aware about the issue of public toilets and their accessibility. Well, this money, which is about 60,000, will fund the creation of a fully disabled accessible toilet and changing space. So Aberforth, we've got a disabled accessible path. It's the only part of the coast path that's disabled accessible. So it means that any individuals who come to the village will be able to access those facilities in the village hall. So it's been a very, I would say it's been a very intense process, even though it's been over 2 years. If I counted up how many Zooms that I've had over the last 2 years, I think I would be shocked at how much time we've all had to put in. It's also involved a real culture change for our hall trust, because before our Heart of the Community project, trustees were very much, we're here to look after the hall and hire it out. There was no thinking bigger, but the Heart of the Community project has made us really engage with the community and find out what they want. And what they wanted was somewhere that was open longer hours. They wanted something that offered free Wi-Fi, a drop-in centre. They wanted something that was eco-friendly. They wanted something that offered a variety of events. In our grant bids, we've committed to staging 6 cultural events a year, things like Welsh choirs and that. So from being a very passive trust who just basically looked after the building, we're now much more forward-looking, engaging with the community. The community fridge, which launched in September, we've managed to have 28 volunteers sign up. So I am now working on getting us the Investors in Volunteer Award. That's quite a bit of a sort of process, but that in itself, again, will open up other funding opportunities, particularly for a volunteer coordinator. And then eventually, I hope, once we open the doors in, well, it should be spring 23, but you know what buildings are like, it could be summer 23, that we can get funding for a hall manager, which will eventually become sustainable through hiring out the hall on a more professional basis for things like social events, weddings, when we're all allowed to do that sort of thing again. So that's basically the heart of the community project. It's already attracted a lot of attention. I was actually giving a podcast to the Village Hall's website. It's like a UK-wide website that deals with village halls. And I think that the experiences we've had have, I'm very happy to share. So if any of your halls are thinking of doing a similar project or just rebuilding or refurbishing, I'm more than happy to share what we've been through, because it has been a big learning curve. And, you know, no one wants to reinvent the wheel. And particularly, obviously, Pavo, you're in Powys, your sort of corresponding organisation in Ceredigion and Cavo were really helpful. So again, the other thing that we had to do for all funding applications was get our policies in place. And luckily we had a hall secretary who was very keen on policies. So we've got all those in place now, volunteer policies, everything you can think of. I mean, particularly the Welsh Government, they asked for a raft of policies. So it's really important to have those in place. And like your fire risk assessment, to make sure they're kept up to date. It's no good having a policy and sticking it, you know, on your hard drive or in the cupboard and not revisiting it. So we're much more aware of our policies, and we're much more aware of how they have to be kept up to date. So bit of boring red tape, but it really is important, because it gives you that sort of ballast, if you like, for your grant application. So that's it in a nutshell. And you know, it's really been exciting for the village. I must say, when the demolition guys moved in last month, we had a last event. It had to be all socially distanced, but we had a choir come to sing. They had to sing 10 meters away from the first row to fit in with our risk assessment. But it was a really emotional and quite a moving little event, because it, you know, that hall had hosted VE Day celebrations. So the fact that it was being knocked down was, well, it was really moving for the village. And on the back of this, we've had a tiny bit of funding from the Heritage Lottery, and we're scanning people's photographs of all their events in the hall going back over the years. We've got pictures, we had a scanning event on Saturday. We've got pictures of jumble sales. I don't know if anyone remembers those. The first sort of sign of recycling, really. Jumble sales from the 70s. We've got adeiladau from the 40s. So it's what we're going to do is make big exhibition boards of these images, which will be in the new hall. So the old hall, even though it's gone, will live on in the new hall. So yeah, that's it. So any questions, and again, you know, if you need me to come and have a chat with your own hall committees, I'd be more than happy to. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue. That's absolutely amazing. Really, really going to be great to see the end product. I think we need to make a trip down to Aberforth just to see it. We've got a few questions for you. I'm just going to ask 2 or 3 at the moment. Sydd has asked, does this food donation approach not undermine the fair share / food bank arrangements?
No, food banks are completely different to community fridges. Food banks are about tackling food poverty and you have to have a voucher, you know, whereas a community fridge is about tackling food waste. So like tomorrow, I'll be going to our Tesco store at 8:30 and they give all the stuff you know, that's usually in the sort of the chiller cabinet. So it tends to be fresh produce and things like, you know, flowers and that. So anything that's past its sell-by date as opposed to its use-by date. The community fridge network, we're one of only 2 in Ceredigion. The community fridge network is run by the co-op and it's the hubbub is the sort of umbrella body. And it's purely about tackling food waste. So it's an environmental campaign more than anti-poverty. But of course, it does help. I mean, Aberforth, we're a flying start area. It's got quite a high level of family poverty, but there's no stigma. Anybody can come and collect. You know, we were given 2 huge boxes of bananas by Tesco, and they were gone within about 2 hours. So, you know, and that food would have gone to landfill. So we weigh out the food. And I think within one week, we save something like 70 kilograms going to landfill. So it's really good practice. And, you know, what we're hoping to do once we get the new hall with a decent kitchen is do luncheon clubs for the community with the food from the community fridge.
Wonderful. That's really, really good. And one last question from Audrey. Really, really impressed by what you said. And how did you kickstart all of this? Where did you get funding for your posts from? Okay,
well, the trust actually, I just charged by the hour because I live in the village, so I was really keen. I've actually got a background. I was involved with the restoration of Cardigan Castle, so I was quite au fait with how projects worked and how funding bids were put together. And what it meant is, and I think it was about £1,000 over the 2 years, but it gave a focus and it meant that I could be out there pulling in what we needed, etc. It's a lot to ask volunteers to do, to be honest, a big project like this. So if you can, I mean, what we could have done was access funding from the lottery. You can get funding to help you with the feasibility process, if you like. And so if you don't have, the village hall had the reserves from the car park, and it was money well spent, as it turned out, you know, because I managed to pull down quite a lot of money. But if you don't have those reserves, it's really worth going for that sort of seed funding from the lottery to kickstart your project.
Thank you for that. And yes, Sydd, I totally agree. We all need a Sydd.
We need to
connect you, Sydd. Rent you out.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you ever so much.
So just in terms of that, how many hours were you actually doing a week in terms of when you were setting up the project?
Well, you know, the only thing I charged for was the actual on the computer, putting the bids together. I mean, all the going out in the community, doing the consultation, I didn't charge for because I did that as a community member, and obviously volunteers were helping with that. But I suppose, I think probably about, crikey, about 200 hours all told, but also obviously spread over the year. The really intensive work is putting the grant bid together and making sure you've got your policies and everything sort of fits in. That was really intense. And, you know, you have obviously with the lottery, you go through stage 1 and then they say, yeah, we really like that. And then you have to do it all over again for stage 2, which is, and so, yeah, your treasurer, your finances and that really have to be spot on. So that was where the time was sucked up. But, you know, looking back, it was just being focused. You know, if you can focus on what it is you want and having a really good vision that everybody in your trust or charity signs up to, that's the basics for success, I think.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you again, Sue. We are now going to move on to our booklet. This booklet, as Melissa briefly said earlier, has been developed with the input of our committee members and trustees. So we're going to have a look through this.
It is very much going to be a whistle-stop tour of it, just to make sure that we've got time at the end, just to have a quick discussion.
So the booklet goes through following achievements. We've got benefits to the community, challenges, hindsight and forward thinking, plus some advice. So over the past few years, even before the pandemic, our community buildings and village halls have accomplished some really huge achievements. From securing major funding, which helped replace roofs, windows, and outdated heating systems, to saving halls from closure by working together with their communities. We've installed life-saving equipment and having improved the overall appearance of their buildings. Also helping to establish so that their halls so that they could make it through the pandemic and continue to provide a vital service. So the benefits to the community. Halls are now cleaner, warmer, and more inviting, and we're listening to what the community needs. Grant funding has afforded a lot of significant improvements, which in turn has promoted greater use of the buildings and helps to improve the social cohesion, especially in such rural and isolated areas as ours. The buildings are becoming a vital hub in their villages and towns, allowing groups to meet and participate in classes which help their mental and physical well-being. Even buildings which were built pre-World War I are now given an assured and longer life, allowing the buildings to become more financially viable and bringing communities back together. These past 20 months have afforded our trustees the time to look at what is needed to continue to improve their resilience and do everything possible to make the buildings look and feel the part. So challenges. Of course, along the way, they've come up against a variety of challenges. Sometimes felt like it was an uphill battle and very draining. But with patience and perseverance, they saw it through. They overcame financial challenges, technology issues, and what felt like mountains of paperwork. Sometimes faced with strong personalities, which led to differences between trustees and struggles trying to secure funding. They found it difficult to decipher COVID regulations as community centres weren't a focus, along with dealing with local councils proving very taxing. So hindsight and forward thinking. So in hindsight and looking forward to the future, our trustees have found that even though lockdown was a drain for some, it allowed them the time to take care of various maintenance aspects, and it highlighted the importance of community buildings. Keep chipping away at what you can. Also, it showed how imperative it is to keep the locals in the loop, along with keeping appropriate records and not reinventing the wheel. Look to others and work together. COVID rules change regularly, but by keeping on top of their risk assessments and informing hirers, this made it a smoother transition. And although some struggled with marketing their venues, others found new ways of communicating via social media. It's made the halls look for support and funding opportunities and realise to continue to secure their halls' futures, they need the help of the younger generations. So when asked, what one piece of advice would you give to prospective trustees or committee members? Above all, don't panic. So time has shown that just filling a chair doesn't always constitute a productive committee or management group. Be selective and heed expert advice. Utilise your time to assess what your hall and the community needs. Seek out people who have skills your building will benefit from. For example, accountants or tech-minded people. You always have to be flexible as things can change quickly. Involve your community, even painting things like woodwork or cutting the grass, and always remember to smile. So we want to thank each of you for the tremendous work you've done in our communities, and we hope that this booklet will be there for you to look back on all you have achieved and to inspire you in future developments. It's maybe not quite as ambitious as Sue by knocking down their hall in Aberforth, well, not quite yet. So this is a working document as well, so this will be continued to be added to. There is a survey which I can send out again. And if you feel you'd like to add any more to this, either complete the survey again, or you can send through to me on email. And this will be available then to all of the community halls and buildings to use.
We have it bilingually as well. So there is a Welsh copy for you all to have as well as part of that. So this brings us to our last section, and just if there are any questions that haven't been answered, and in terms of that future support, has this session brought forward anything else that you feel, that any of you feel that is vital for you to have in order to continue to develop and to continue to provide your services to the communities around you?
We have a control of a couple of listed buildings. So we have extra sort of like worries and things, trying to get it renovated. There's still quite a few bits and pieces that need renovating. We could do with a bit of help in knowing how to proceed forwards, because until we can get the whole thing really up and running, we can't do anything. We can't hire it out because it's not compliant. We're in the middle of doing fire risk assessments, and we're in the middle of renovating the entire lot. And we've just had our electrical report. We're waiting for that to come back, but we still don't really know yet what we can do. So we've been using our outside space as much as possible and hiring that, but we need help in knowing what we can do to move forward with regards to getting CADU involved, because apparently everybody's like going, oh, don't get CADU involved because you'll be there forever, but they're listed buildings. So we need to, I need help with that one, basically.
Amanda, I have a conversation with Julia tomorrow evening, supporting with a couple of things in terms of PAVO support. I'm more than happy for you to come on to that call, but we can take forward all of your points and support you where we can in terms of that to get you to a place you need to be.
Yeah, thank you. That would be fantastic. Send me the details. I'll send, I think you've got my email, but I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, no problem, Amanda. I've got your email. I'll send it over to you.
Thank you. And thank you.
Nick.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the booklet that you showed us there, Melissa. That, you know, I think it shows that, you know, there's a commonality of experience across the piece there in terms of halls, but we're all on the same page to a certain extent, you know. So the whole notion of pulling together as we go forward and perhaps sharing the experiences, sharing the skills that we've developed in certain areas, you know, is clearly something that would assist across the piece, really. So you know, I know the theory better than I know the practice in terms of delivering community halls, but you know, so it is a learning curve, and it is always useful to actually pull good experience out of the mix as well.
Thanks, Nick. Before I can see a few people disappearing, Phil, I can see your comment that you messaged me. Sue is more than happy. We've got Sue's contact details, so from Aberforth Village Hall. So if there is any other questions that any of you want to ask Sue, she's more than happy for those questions to be asked, and we can feed that back through to you and share it with all of you, so you can see those additional questions and answers.
Okay. So, diolch Martin a Sue am eich amser heddiw a am y pwyntiau diddorol a godoedd. Thank you, Martin and Sue, for your time today and for the really interesting points raised. Diolch am ddod i'n gweithlu. Thank you for attending our workshop. So we hope you've all found this useful, and thank you for your time this evening.